Hello there! In this devlog I'm gonna talk about how I created sound effects for my game, and a few tips on how to use them in Godot. I'll cover my process for creating them and also Godot specific stuff like spatial audio, filters and audio buses. I'm Vinny and this is Star Devlog the 13th. Step number 1. Think on the sound you want to achieve. Like this enemy, when it moves I feel it should have a squishy sound. Step number 2. Create or find the base for your sound. You have two options here. You either record the sound yourself or you can try to find something online that looks like what you want. Just be careful to only use sounds with permissive license, which you are allowed to change. Well, if you're curious, for the squishy sounds I used a melon. Even knowing it's just a rock melon, it still sounds disgusting. Step number 3. Add effects to your sound. So you can make something that sounds like this sound like this. As everyone else in the planet, I use Audacity as my sound editor. It's simple, but it has many tools and it's free. I can't talk much about effects because I don't really know much about them, but here are a few tricks I used while struggling to edit my sounds. First one is stacking sounds to make them more interesting. You can have multiple tracks and you can use different sounds stacked. Here's one example. This enemy attack, which I use a combination of a lower pitch sound to represent anticipation and a high pitch sound when the action is made. So instead of trying to reach this sound from the beginning, I just combine two sounds. Second tip is offsetting loops. When dealing with looping sounds, sometimes it's hard to match the beginning and the ending of the sound. Even more when you have a constant sound like this. Even if both sides are close enough, you may hear these clacks when the sound is looped. There is a very simple and effective way to deal with it. Cut a piece from the beginning and paste it, overlapping with the ending. After that, apply a fading effect to the cut from the beginning and a fade out effect to the overlapping ending. This makes the transition smooth, and as the sound wave is guaranteed to match both ends, you won't hear the clack anymore. Third tip is always remember to save the Audacity project. Keep in mind that once you have all the sounds stacked, you can't go back, so always keep the project file so you are able to tweak the sounds later if you wish. Going back to the main list, step number 4, export your file and use it in Godot. So the first thing you may want to change is the importing settings for audio files. By default, audio files are looped, which is not ideal for most of the sound effects. When adding a new file to the project, select it in the file system dock, and you can go to the import settings and uncheck the loop configuration. If you want all the files to not loop by default, you can set it as default preset. To use your file, you need to create a new audio node. You have a few options here. The audio stream player is just a simple node with some default options like volume and pitch. It's useful for UI stuff and background music. The audio stream players 2D or 3D, depending on your game, are positional nodes. This means you can set a position, and as you move through the scene, the sound source and volume will change. If you're listening to this video with stereo headphones or speakers, you can listen to the effect here. There is a caveat though. The sound is played as if the listener is in the center of the screen. In many cases that's not true. Your character can move around while the camera is fixed. If you're developing a 3D game, there is a node called listener that works like the camera node. You can set it as a child of another node and all sounds will be played using the listener as reference. If you're developing a 2D game though, bad news. There is no equivalent node for 2D. There is a really old issue that became a proposal and then there is a PR for it, but the milestone set is Godot 4. I really hope they release it for Godot 3 though, because I don't intend to migrate my game anytime soon. After adding the audio node to the scene, you need to load your audio in the stream field, and you can play it. Here are two nice tips. Sometimes you may have a sound that is repeated over and over, like footsteps. If you use the same sound, it feels boring and maybe even become annoying over time. You could have different footstep sound effects, which would be more dynamic, but the trade-off is that you have multiple files, meaning a heavier build. It gets worse if you have different footsteps depending on the terrain. But fear not, Godot has a nice solution for that. There is this helper class called AudioStreamRandomPitch that, you guess, plays the sound with a random pitch every time you trigger it. To use it, go to your audio node and select the new AudioStreamRandomPitch. Then you set your audio file in the AudioStream field. You can set the intensity of the pitch variation in the random pitch property. Now every time the sound is played, it sounds slightly different. The second tip is about repeating sounds. You can set the loop property and start and stop via code. However, sometimes it may sound weird. Look at this example here. I have this constant beep, which is just a short sound file being looped. When the player leaves the affected area, it stops. But because this sound has a little bit of reverb, I feel stopping it feels too blunt, like the sound is cut in half. The way I work around that was by looping the sound manually. I have this method called play audio, which verifies if the sound is playing already, and if it's not, it plays again. I call it in the process method in case the sound is enabled. The benefit of doing this is that the sound will never be stopped midway, so it feels more natural. It may be just preference, but I do feel it sounds better this way. I think the last thing left to talk about sounds in Godot is audio buses and effects. The buses are channels your audio goes through. By default, Godot comes with the master channel, and you can add extra ones like these ones I added. In your audio node, you can define to which audio bus your sound should be streamed to. Having multiple audio buses allows you to control the volume independently and also apply effects to it. A good example would be creating adaptive soundtracks. Let's say you have underwater sections in a level. You could make it more immersive by applying a low-pass effect when underwater. I used a low-pass effect when a player takes damage. The audio goes muffled for around 1 second to give a better feel. Well, it's not as noticeable because I haven't put any soundtrack in my game, but let me use a temporary sound so you can hear it. And here's how I achieved that. You can see my master bus has this sound effect, but it's not enabled. So in the code, I call the audio server and I pass the audio bus index and the sound effect index. Hopefully this gave you some idea on what to expect when creating sound effects for your game. And if that's your case, give me a like and subscribe to the channel. A smooth transition here, eh? Well, I know that everybody whine about this kind of stuff, but I don't need to say that more than 86% of people that watch my videos are not subscribed.
You know what this is? It's the world's smallest violin playing just for the waitresses.
So if you're here again, subscribe. It's not like a contract or anything. It's free and it just helps me to reach out to more people. Thanks for watching this far. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good week and see you next time.